6 years since I quit my corporate job to become an artist. I mean, who does that? Granted, the decision wasn't as reckless as it sounds, but in retrospect, I was pretty naive about how to pursue this new career. I'm in a good place now that it's fun to reflect on those earlier years. So here are the 6 lessons I learned 6 years into this journey. Lesson number 1. Things take longer than you think, and that's okay. I learned that time is not created equal. What we can accomplish in a year or 5 years has nothing to do with the fact that we all have 24 hours in a day, and more to do with our personality, drive, and circumstances. I'm not saying that if you don't reach your goals, it means you're lazy. I am saying it's unhelpful to compare our own progress with someone else's because everyone is built differently, comes from different privileges or hardships that impact how they work. This is especially true for people you follow on the internet. They're only showing what they want other strangers on the internet to see. So instead of feeling envious of another artist's fast success, try to practice self-compassion that you're doing the best you can. And instead of judging someone for being stuck in the same place, also try to practice empathy for the other person. We have this survivor bias where we only hear from people who have experienced rapid success. They launch an Etsy store and in the first month make $10,000. But that's not the norm for most of us. Even if they tell you, you can do it too, just buy my $1,000 course. The people who are outliers are loudly sharing their success because, let's be honest, it feels good to. But that rush of energy that comes from that rapid success is unsustainable. If you're starting a business for the first time, you're exercising new mental muscles or literal muscles, and you're wearing a lot of hats, not just as an artist. It's like learning to crawl and sprint at the same time. Knowing that, it's good to have grace that things are going to take longer than you expect to get the results that you want. Take breaks, be consistent over time, but don't give up. Lesson number 2. People can't buy from you if they don't know you exist, and that requires you to put yourself out there. Sometimes it's the most obvious things that we need to be reminded of. It's like, if you don't have oxygen, you'll die. Putting yourself out there doesn't mean putting an Instagram post or reel up. It also means showing up in person, in real life. It can be as small as mentioning what you do and weaving that into your conversation with people. Join a small business group or an online community with other like-minded people. For me, starting this YouTube channel was a big putting myself out there decision because as an introvert, I'd much rather hide behind my screen and my art. Social media can be a great place to connect with other makers and creators without leaving your house, but I feel like sometimes we use it as a crutch to not show up in other less comfortable ways. I can't keep track of how many times I've gotten orders from ex-coworkers, friends' mom, parents from my kid's school, or a neighbor because I let them know in a non-obnoxious way about my art. Word of mouth is such a powerful and underrated marketing channel that it helps businesses of all sizes, small or big. When I first started growing my wholesale business, I had to physically walk in stores and strike up a conversation with the person working there to find out how to pitch my products to them. This is not easy at all for my personality, but I did it because I knew face-to-face still beats cold emails. I also knew that rejection was part of this journey, so I just had to do it. And guess what? My success rate was much higher than emails. So what is one way you can put yourself out there this week? The quicker you can make a decision and go for it, the less time you have to talk yourself out of it and let your anxiety build up. I know, I've been there. Lesson number 3, going narrow and deep is better than going far and wide. If you're like me and have shiny object syndrome, let's say you've experienced some success, your next instinct might want be to go after the next idea and make something new. Let's say your greeting cards are doing well and you feel tempted to print those designs on art prints or tote bags or mugs. Before you make that jump, resist the urge to chase a shiny object. Sit with it for a bit. What you probably should be doing is finding more customers with your current bestsellers. These bestsellers are often how new people find your work first and their first introduction to your brand. So rather than being lured into creating a whole different category of products, which in itself requires new processes and research, understanding new cost structures and new marketing efforts, identify what you are selling well right now and figure out what complementary products or designs you can create. If you really can't resist the urge to make new products, At the very least, before you decide to go all in on that new thing, survey your current customers and ask if it's something they would be interested in. Keep in mind though that just because they say yes doesn't mean they'll actually buy it. I've experienced that plenty of times. So take it with a grain of salt and start with small quantities and take pre-orders whenever possible. An example of this is my alphabet blanket, which was the first product that is my art on fabric. It did really well, but it added a whole new manufacturing supply chain to my business. Since it did sell well, it made me feel overconfident that maybe I could sell them, maybe I could start selling baby onesies too, with the same designs. Lo and behold, my baby onesies totally didn't take off due to a myriad of reasons. And it wasn't until I doubled down on baby blankets and made a second version that is complementary on my first that my sales continue to grow. Now, the same customers who purchased my first blanket have another option to buy, and it's also a great gift item they can purchase over and over again for their family and friends. Lesson number 4, success is a feeling, not a number. This has become my new mantra. Some people are very metrics driven. If I were to generalize, I'd say that artists are usually not, and that's not a bad thing. When I first started my business, I put a lot of pressure on myself to replace my full-time corporate salary in 2 years. This caused a lot of pressure and anxiety because I was so focused on number-based goals that I burned myself out from doing commissions and freelance work in the first 2 years by saying yes to everything, while trying to build a wholesale business from scratch. While it did help me grow, every time I reached a milestone or when I had a surprise success that I didn't expect, I noticed that dopamine high quickly faded. By the time I actually reached that goal in year 5, it didn't really mean the same as it did 5 years ago. Don't get me wrong, I was proud of myself, but I feel that by putting a strict timeline on financial goals when it comes to your creativity, it might be the very thing that could kill it. I don't want to dismiss the importance of setting goals and working hard to reach them, and I do believe we have to work hard in the beginning for our business to survive and eventually thrive. But I also think for many people, especially the ones who are driven by accomplishments, we may find it hard to stop or knowing when to stop because the goalposts always move. I often talk about this psychology term called hedonic treadmill, which means your happiness baseline resets soon after a positive or negative event. I now realize that success for me is more about how I feel every day, about the things I'm working on and the people I'm connecting with, and less to do with cold-hearted metrics. It's not that I am on my way to arriving at this ultimate destination of success. I need to feel like I've already arrived. I don't need a list of checkboxes for me to feel successful. I can acknowledge my success while still working after my goals. I can always chase higher numbers to hit, but in the long run, I found that to be unsustainable because there's always the next number to hit. Happiness is forever one goal away unless you enjoy the process. Lesson number 5. Monetizing your passion requires a delicate balance. In the earlier days, one of the warning signs I heard about other successful creatives is that once you turn your passion into a business, you end up spending less time working on your actual craft. That definitely became true for me. On the outside, it may seem like I get to live my dream of making art every day, sharing it with the world, and having people buy it. But in reality, a lot of sweat and tears went into growing the business. It's in all the behind the scenes and unglamorous things that people don't see. Some people may decide that their creative hobbies should just stay as creative hobbies, and that's completely fine. That type of clarity and acceptance is very liberating. But for those of us like myself who have made the decision to make a living with our creativity, I think we may have missed the fine print when we signed up for this, that we were going to spend less time creating and more time operating. For a lot of people, turning their creativity into their profession may eventually kill it. For me, growing this business has actually made me a better and well-rounded artist. So just know which camp you're in, or sometimes you have to try it out before you know what works and doesn't work for you. So to learn which type of person you are, you may have to just go out there and try it. Just because something is working, it doesn't mean you have to make it bigger. This one is inspired by one of my role models in the industry, Emily McDowell, who sold her successful stationery business after 10 years. If you're not familiar with her story, I'll link her podcast below where she talked about her exit. Long story short, over the course of building her stationery empire, she has experienced many periods of burnout and ultimately felt disconnected from her own brand, which was once her baby. While I'm not saying we will all go through that journey, I do want to remind myself that success for the sake of success is not what it's all cracked up to be. If you have experienced initial success, it's easy to want to keep making it bigger and bigger. There's the saying in business that if you're not growing, you're falling behind. And I feel that's very one-dimensional. We're not a company on Wall Street like Google that needs to please their investors with meaningful growth rate year over year. Growing a company bigger often requires you to learn new skills and manage new resources in order to sustain that growth. It also requires you to quit doing some of your current jobs, which you may or may not be ready to do. It's okay to not grow. It's okay to say, this year, I'm in maintenance mode to preserve my creative energy for myself and my family. Have I learned more than 7 lessons in 6 years? Absolutely. But I'm just making a YouTube video here, not writing a book. So if you're still here, that means I've successfully captured your attention till the end. So thank you. Remember, you don't have to have everything figured out. You just have to take the next step. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.